morning, everybody. Welcome to Todd Clint and Shane Young's SharePoint podcast, number 374, recorded live Wednesday, our new recording time, Wednesday morning, January 31st, 2018. I am your host, Todd Clint. I have been able to follow the movement. 9 years ago, I did this on Monday mornings, and then I moved it to Monday nights, and then I moved it to Monday afternoons, and then the last 3 weeks has been Tuesday mornings. I think we're finally in one spot, Wednesday mornings, 10 o'clock Central, 11 o'clock Eastern. I have followed you the whole way. This other guy, I picked him up along the way. Tell everybody who you are.
Hi, my name is Shane Young, and I'm not going to lie, I almost forgot the show was this morning, so I don't blame any of you that didn't make it, because I did. Todd's like, hey, you ready to do this thing? I'm like, yeah, I'm over here having a good old time, drinking a beer, doing some work.
Yeah.
So, yes, but, you can always hit me up on the old Twitters to tell me that you agree that I shouldn't miss the show, and it's at Shane's Cows or Bold Zebra, shane.young@boldzebra.com.
Yeah, and if you want to reach out to me and tell me how much you don't like Shane, I'm at Todd Clint on Twitter or todd@toddclint.com on the old email. The thing that everybody keeps saying is going to go away that's been going strong for like 30 years.
I don't even understand. I mean, it was literally carrier pigeons to email, right? Everything in between has just been noise.
Yeah, and it's showing no signs of slowing down. So for production notes, again, we moved to Wednesdays, hopefully for good. So that's Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. You can watch us on YouTube. If you're listening to the MP3 stream, you've not noticed the change because the MP3s keep going out. On youtube.com/ToddClintNetcast. Or I've got a short URL, toddclint.com/YouTube. We'll pop you over there. We've got the Slack room, so you can jump in there. We've got some folks in there with the live thing. And I really appreciate the live audience. As a person who spends most of his time talking to rooms of people and all that, the interaction with the audience is, man, it's key. It makes all the difference in the world. So appreciate the folks in Slack, and we'd love to have you join us. So go to toddclint.com/podcast, and you can see a link there to get that. Speaking of websites, I am moving my website, and that's coming along nicely. Troubleshooting some things and got that all worked out. I got Shane added, so he'll be able to do some stuff, and he gets alerts so he can see when people tell him his stuff is crap. Probably in the next week or so, going to do like a round robin A record so that some people that go to www.toddclint.com go to the old one, some go to the new one, just to kind of see how that all works out. It's going well.
Man, you're thorough, right? I'm more of the just cut it and break it and see what happens. But you're going through a process. You've done testing. You made me test. Kudos to you. I do not have those type of patience. So good job.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I know that if anything goes to heck, I'm the guy that has to fix it. So I'm trying to fix those things now because I know that it's going to be me now or during the fire. One thing I did learn, so I'm moving databases because that's just how that works. The actual database for my blog is about 2.5 gig. That's what the backup is. So that's all the blog posts and all that kind of stuff. That one moves pretty easily. I also, because it is recognized worldwide as a premier podcasting platform, I have all of the podcast files also in SharePoint in a separate web app and a separate content database. That thing is tipping the scales at like 60, 65 gigs, something like that. Moving that back up from one server to another, proving to be a bit of a challenge. Most internet copy utilities and services are not equipped to handle 65 gig files. And so one of the things as I was testing this last week, I don't want to say I discovered, because that's like saying Columbus discovered America when there was 1 million people living here at the time. But I found the way to make a SQL backup go over multiple files. And so that's one of the things that I tested with the 2.5 gig database. I did some restores this week. So that will help me get some stuff over and get the media moved over too. So I might do that when that's a little easier.
Yeah, well, and speaking of SharePoint databases, so one of the customers I had a call yesterday with, they're wanting to migrate their SharePoint 2010 to SharePoint 2016. And, it turns out we're going to use a third-party tool to do most of the work. But I was like, how many content databases do you have? Just trying to scope it out. He's like, 330. And I'm like, wow, because he's telling me this after he'd already given me a tour of, here's our web app and here's our, handful of site collections. I'm like, I haven't seen 330 site collections yet, carry the one. I was really confused. So I was like, well, show me these 330. And it turns out, remember in 2010 how the analytics stuff liked to spin up its own databases as it went?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got 300 of those. So it was a little crazy. It was a little awkward for a few minutes when I was just like, I don't want to call you a liar, but I know you don't have 330 content databases. Let's figure this out.
I'm trying to think of what the largest number of content databases we've seen in the wild is. It's not that ridiculous, but it was jaw-droppingly ridiculous. And that was one of those things where, I'm talking like probably SharePoint 2007, 2010 days, where some well-intentioned admin was at a conference somewhere and heard somebody say, site collection should go in its own content database or something like that. And then heard someplace else you should scale by site collection. And they put those two things together and every site collection went in its own content database. But I'm thinking maybe 100. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the biggest one I worked on was actually in 2003. It was a university who did my sites for each student. And yeah, they had, I think we started with like 50 content databases. In 2003, right, that was about 49 content databases more than the rest of the world.
Might as well have been 50,000, yeah.
Yeah, and it worked. I mean, SharePoint didn't care, but man, I was weirded. And once again, it's just like, this is awkward. I don't know what the heck.
Yep. So another thing I wanted to bring up about SharePoint and my blog and all that, my blog is currently hosted on SharePoint 2010. Again, universally understood as one of the premier blogging platforms. And it's funny because I kick myself in the butt all the time for doing that. And just this week on Twitter, one of the folks out there, Connor Gurney, sends me a ping. He's like, hey, I see that your SharePoint blog is hosted on SharePoint. You go, girl. I want to do the same thing. I want to ask you some questions about how you did it. And I replied back, I'm like, all I can tell you is don't.
No is the answer.
Yeah, I will answer any of your questions and give you all the information that you want to know. But understand, my advice to you is don't run. There be dragons. This is a horrible idea. So he and I had a good conversation about the ins and the outs of that. And kind of what I told him was, I did the SharePoint 2010 thing 8 years ago because I wanted to eat my own dog food, and I've learned a bunch about SharePoint hosting my own SharePoint blog. I mean, just a bunch of the innards. I've made every mistake possible. But as SharePoint has progressed, because that's now 4 versions of SharePoint old, 3 versions of SharePoint old, every version of SharePoint improves the viewer's experience. And a big way that it does that is with identity. It knows who you are and it figures out what things are important to you and what you have access to. And every version of SharePoint hates anonymous users just a little bit more. And that's everybody that comes to my blog. So it's just not a good platform.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And it's also at the same time crazy, right? How much 2010 we're talking about lately. I guess we've gotten to that point in the product life cycle where people are like, 2010 might have to move on.
Yeah.
The other migration project that I'm working on right now is the SharePoint 2010 environment, but they're still running 95% of it in 2007.
Holy crap.
User experience. And he's like, yeah, like this feature over here on this site, it doesn't work in Chrome. I was like, yeah, because Chrome didn't exist when this site was built. I mean, I don't have an answer for you other than it literally has no idea what Chrome is.
No idea. Yep. That's hysterical.
It's making me, I'm having to pull some muscles, It's kind of like going to the batting cage now, right? You get some muscles back there that, they still swing that bat. But, man, the next day they're like, oh, you haven't used me in 17 years.
Yeah, the good news about that is I've found the old versions of SharePoint, man, they're just like riding a bike. I get in there, because I think, I don't know about for you, but for me, the 2007, 2010 timeframe with SharePoint was the time when I could do everything with SharePoint. Except branding or developing or anything. But I mean, from an admin standpoint, I could wrap my head around all of SharePoint and give it a big hug and really, get it. SharePoint 2013, things started getting a little more complicated. So I get back into those old ones and I'm like, I feel at home.
See, and I'm like, where site settings is it on the left or the right? I mean, why do we have to move that every single time, Microsoft?
So, folks, that is a true story. I had Shane testing my blog, and I'm like, all right, I've moved it, and I've given you permission. Go in there, do some admin things. He's like, where is site settings? I think something's screwed up. I'm like, it's not screwed up. You're just not looking in the right spot.
I just wasn't ready for it to be over there.
That's funny stuff.
And then with SharePoint Online now, right, when you switch to modern pages, site settings doesn't show up in the menu on modern pages. You got to go back to a classic page to find site settings. The best I can tell.
That's awesome.
Oh,
That's awesome. Well, should we get into some content?
no, I like this mindless rambling.
So this is mostly has to do with nothing anybody's ever talked about, but just the phrase of this just cracks me up. So you and I travel a lot, and part of traveling a lot is figuring out which hotel chain you want to stay at by default, which airline you want to use by default, and who has the best frequent flyer packages, and do you want window seats or aisle seats and all that kind of stuff. So I saw a story this week that reminds me why I chose Delta, and I think you chose Delta because at the time Cincinnati was a hub. But I saw this headline. This is not The Onion. This is not Babylon Bee. This is honest to God, this is Fox News. Woman denied emotional support peacock on United flight. So there's just a whole bunch of things about that are hysterical. One that's cracking me up is when I first read this headline, it appeared to me like United was offering emotional support peacocks on this flight and did not give one to this woman. So it was like, woman denied Coke and peanuts on United. I'm like, why? What? How the what? But no, it turns out this whole emotional support animal thing, emotional support pigs and hamsters and all, has gotten to the point where this woman had an emotional support peacock and she tried to take it on a flight with her.
Oh, now, and folks, I want to give you perspective, right? You're like, because it never crossed my mind that United was giving out peacocks to everyone who got on the plane. But we have to remember that Todd's from Iowa, and so I'm assuming that with every flight he gets a complimentary cow or a stalk of corn or something.
A little cow, because they're so cute. They get the big eyes and the eyelashes. Yeah.
So you got to remember Todd's perspective where he comes up with this. But I'm with you. This whole emotional support animal, and we're probably offending viewers right now. It drives me bonkers.
Yep. Yeah.
I keep. Go ahead.
And so when I read that, I misparsed that title. I'm like, and that's exactly why I fly Delta. Delta would never pull this crap. If they had one emotional support peacock, everybody would get one on the whole plane. That's.
I mean, Delta would, and that's one of the things, in my giant horse, moose, hippo, dog thing over there that's sleeping in the chair. With him, I keep threatening to get me one of those vests, like service dog in training. I'm like, I mean, at this point, everyone's got one. I mean, can I not certify my own emotional needs dog? Yeah. Or do I wear a vest that says I'm his emotional support human? This is
probably more truth to that. So that just cracked me up. And the other thing that I thought about that is once I parsed it through, I thought, if I ever start a band, emotional support peacocks is on my short list of band names. And now opening for the Misfits, the emotional support peacocks.
Oh, for the Misfits, aren't you fancy?
I'm old school.
All right. So speaking of how fancy you are, you look like one of my college students today. Why on earth, folks, this is why you should watch the video version. Todd Clint, let me describe this, he's got his terrible haircut.
I do.
His cowlick's kind of to that point in the haircut cycle where it's doing its thing. He's wearing this black and blue T-shirt that may or may not be cool. It's hard to tell. But then over top of it, he has this light gray Microsoft Most Valuable Professional vest. So no sleeves, but to keep him warm, it has a hood.
It's actually to hide my colic.
Todd, tell us about this terrible outfit you're wearing, because I can't do enough justice for how it insults my eyes.
Well, so I am hip. I think that's a big part of this thing. I think you've met. And so part of it was, so I do this Microsoft OneDrive Experts thing. It's a program that Microsoft has, Stephen Rose and those guys. And I've spoken about OneDrive at enough things that I got a free T-shirt. So this week I got a new OneDrive T-shirt. So he's got the OneDrive logo there, and I got the OneDrive logo here.
It's like you're sponsored. I mean, you're like those NASCAR guys. Yep, today I want to thank OneDrive for my performance. Yeah.
And so I thought, if I'm rocking the hip Microsoft duds, I might as well throw the vest on too. Plus, it's kind of chilly. I live in Iowa, so it's getting a little cold.
Yeah, the rest of us send that stuff straight to Goodwill. There's a whole camp of homeless people wearing my MVP awesomeness.
I think so. MVP renewal stuff's coming up. I think when I have my meeting with our lead, I'll make sure I wear all this. Was that a video meeting or was it just audio?
It was Skype, so you can turn on your camera and show her just how terrible you are.
How much of a suck up I truly am.
Oh, all right. Let's tell these people something more interesting than what you're wearing.
Uh, all right. So we're at the first month of 2018 is almost over, and Microsoft has been super busy putting out new stuff. And I think this is nothing new. This whole agile development and CI/CD stuff and all this kind of. I mean, Microsoft has embraced all of that, and this is nothing new. But man, it seems like the last couple of weeks they have hit it full stream. So I think that's part of the stuff that we're going to talk about for the rest of the podcast. So the first one, and I don't know if you've gotten to play with this yet, but I do not have anything to take advantage of it. But our friend Dan Holm, who is now a senior super something product manager, Delio, who knows what his title is. It's got a lot of words and they jumble them around and all that. But he is part of the marketing for SharePoint and Office 365. And for the last couple of days on Facebook and Twitter, he's all been, I'm using this super cool new feature, vague booking. And turns out what it was is an update to the iOS OneDrive and Office 365 client that now lets you do drag and drop and just all kinds of cool things on Apple devices. Now, I do not own me an Apple device, so I've not been able to actually play with this. But have you touched it yet? Have you seen it?
I haven't played with it because all of the stuff I do is in the OneDrive for pleasure space. I don't have a lot of OneDrive for business stuff on my cute little iPhone. Right?
Gotcha.
My iPhone takes pictures of my dog and my kids, and it plays my Star Wars game, and that's really all my iPhone's for.
Yeah. So for those of you that actually do, use your stuff for work, this is a cool thing, and it goes to show Microsoft is serious about this whole keeping things updated. It's serious about other people's platforms, serious about OneDrive and Office 365 being an honest-to-God work environment.
Yeah, and I mean, let's face it, in corporate America, iPads are rampant, right? The business isn't buying them too much still, but everyone brings their iPad to work, and calls it to meetings. And so OneDrive, meeting the customers where they're at, that's Microsoft's thing right now, and they're kicking butt and taking names.
Yeah, and again, I've never owned an iPad or an iPhone, but they are good platforms for consuming this kind of stuff. So I think Microsoft's, as they're trying to build user base, it's an obvious area.
Yeah, and so in the chat room, Jeff has apparently never heard us refer to OneDrive for pleasure versus OneDrive for business. I don't know.
Well, Jeff's missing out. And Jeff, it will make you even more sick to your stomach when you know that term derived from the difference between Skype. When they renamed Link to Skype for Business, then it got very confusing. Is it Skype for Business or Skype? And then, I don't know who first coined the phrase, but I heard it from some friends of mine in Australia. Like, oh, well, there's Skype for Business, and then there's Skype for Pleasure. And then you start thinking about what Skype for Pleasure might mean, and it goes in very dark places. So a couple of years ago, when they renamed SkyDrive to OneDrive, it got all very confusing. You're like, oh, OneDrive for Business, OneDrive for Pleasure.
All right, so another new feature in Office 365, SharePoint, and OneDrive. I feel like this is a OneDrive show all of a sudden. Microsoft has now given us the ability to move files with full fidelity within that ecosystem. So, it used to be if you move file from SharePoint from SharePoint Online to like your OneDrive for Business, you got the file no problem, but you didn't get all the metadata, the history, the versions, all that fun stuff. And so they finally have rolled that in. I think it's a nice touch. Metadata is something we harp on, and then they lost it for us all the time. So it should help us in that fight to get users to tag stuff better.
Yeah, and it's funny because they kind of allude to it a little bit in one of the blog posts. The ability to copy came out months ago, came out sometime last year. And then the move came out, and the move improves over copy in a bunch of ways. But there's one little line about, is there showing the differences, because essentially a move is just a copy and then a delete. When you think about it. So the obvious question is, how is move better than the copy that already existed and then me just deleting the source? And so they have to enumerate the things that you talked about, the metadata and all that kind of stuff. And they make this one reference to copy used a different API that was also part of publishing and blah, blah. And for those of us who've been doing SharePoint for the last 10 years, we recognize that API. It's called Prime. And it's the way that, SharePoint 2007 did publishing when you were doing that, and it's also the same API that PowerShell and the API that does exporting webs and things like that. It's the same thing. It's the And the idea was to be able to publish things internally with versions and controls and all that, and then use Prime to push them out to an anonymous public-facing site where they were just going to be consumed and not edited and all that. And so that's why those operations only, they lose metadata, they lose permissions, they lose versions, because that was not what that API was designed to do. And so they kind of alluded to that. I'm like, oh, I see what they're doing there.
Which is really bad, right? Because that API was originally invented in 2002, right? It was part of content management server before it came to SharePoint. We got it. They're like, oh, it'll do all these things. We're like, yeah, but it doesn't actually work. So we've kind of stayed away from that. I'm glad to see them continuing to phase that out of the product. I assume they didn't put it in SharePoint Online, but clearly I was wrong. They like to torture themselves.
Yeah, and so a couple of the things, so Shane mentioned, you get versions now, you get metadata. You got to be careful with the metadata because if the place you're moving it to doesn't have all the metadata stuff, you need to fix that. Larger file size, so you can move larger files around. And this is also cross-tenant, which is nice because you can use it to move things around. So if you want to play with this, and you'd be a fool not to, it's right now in targeted release. So you need to go in and set your, which used to be called the first ring or whatever. So set your tenant and your users up for targeted release, and then you should be able to play with it.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges, right? When you listen to the shows like this or you read on the internet, we talk about new features and like, it's in targeted release, it's in general availability. And honestly, if you think it's confusing, Todd and I have the same struggle. One of the things we're going to talk about here a little bit later, we're like, how did we miss the announcement for that? And I told Todd how we missed it because we talked about it when it was in preview, and then when it was in targeted release, and then when it was an idea on the whiteboard, and we just never saw now it's general availability. So we missed the. It's a lot to keep up with.
Yeah, I can't keep track of everything. And in the chat room, Chris is talking about how it hasn't shown up, and he's all targeted released everywhere. They're rolling it out to targeted release, so you have to have. And again, this is weird. Your tenant has a targeted release or not, and then your users have targeted release or not. I don't know which one this does, so I would try them both. And then, even if you do all that, then it still has to roll out to your tenant and your pod and all that. So you can do everything right and still not have it as of today.
Yeah, and sometimes you'll see in their notes, like they talk about some of these features they roll out very quickly. So like everyone gets it in targeted release today. And some of these features, they're like, it's going to take us months to roll this out to everyone in targeted release.
Yeah.
And I think this is one of the ones they said that was going to be a very slow roll. So I'm guessing it's because a lot of complicated code. And then they also said that when they get ready to put it to general availability, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to take months to get it. From the day they say it's available in general availability, it's going to be months before everyone has it in GA. So it's a challenge to keep up with for certain.
Yeah, and in my on-prem, decades-old mind, in my head, that tells me, so things where the tenant has to be in targeted release makes me think that in the back end it's something analogous to server-side code. So, uploading a farm solution at the web app or at the farm level for on-prem folks, and then your tenant gets it when your tenant gets moved to that particular farm. For things where your user has to be in targeted release, I'm thinking of that's like, audience type stuff, downstream kind of things. I could be completely wrong, but that's how my head makes all that make sense.
Yep.
So check that out.
So staying after release stuff, another big update. Microsoft's been busy this month.
They have. And it's just out of the holidays too. They came out, they hit it running.
Well, they didn't do anything in December though. So I think all this stuff was done in November. They didn't work in December. And then now we got to the middle of January. They all came back and they're like, all right, press the button. Anyway, turns out that Teams, right, the replacement to this terrible Slack thing that Todd makes me use, is getting its biggest update ever. I'm like, well, it's like your first real update. Yeah. So yeah, it is. But they went in, they updated Teams, they're rolling out a whole new code base, and the biggest functionality change, best I can tell, is going to be apps. They've added more apps.
Yeah.
They've added more integrations. And to that end, one of the neat things they've done is they've added what they call the slash. So like when you're in Teams, if you type in a /, it then shows you all the things that are available to you, whether it's like jump in navigation or, interact with your third-party app or any of that type of stuff. So it's a pretty big push forward for Teams, but I don't know. I still haven't used Teams for more than 30 seconds. I can't really say.
Yeah, and as someone who uses Slack has had the slash forever, so that it feels like they're playing catch up. And to go even farther, I participate in IRC chat rooms, and those things have been around for 30 years. That's how they do everything is with slashes also. So I mean, it's not like Teams. They're still playing catch up. They're still, and that's why. Yeah, and I've played with Teams a little bit. The other thing is you and I aren't good Teams users because we don't work in a corporate environment. We don't have a team of people to collaborate with, and the guest access is kind of crappy still in Teams.
Yeah.
And so that's kept us from doing it. Though maybe that's what we do. Maybe we kill Skype and we start doing everything with Teams and get up to speed on that.
Force it.
Yeah.
Force it on the poor people.
And it's funny looking in the chat room. Most people. So Chris likes Teams better than Slack, but I don't understand why that is. Maybe he's just, I don't know, sitting in his garage with his car running too long.
Poor Chris. He's having a rough show. Chris, it's okay. You can tell us you hate Todd. He's mean to you.
Yeah. So, and Chris mentions guests. So the guest access to Teams is there, but it's not. So you can have guests from other Office 365 tenants. So Shane's Office 365 tenant user is a guest in my Teams chat room. But what doesn't work is guests that are not that don't have Office 365 identities. So anonymous, like the Slack thing that I'm doing here. Can't do that in Teams yet.
But doesn't the whole world have an Office 365 identity? I mean, isn't that, a pea in every pot and Office 365 in every computer?
I think they would like that, but I think there's still some, and there's some jiggly bits that you can do to make that work, where you can register your email address and it's a thing, but it's not as smooth as Slack is. And Slack is not smooth, let's be clear, but Teams is even more work.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I mean,
for all the Teams loving folks, they're getting there.
Yeah, it's they're pushing forward, and that's what you want to see instead of we haven't had an update in 6 months because the whole product team works in another group now. That's what you're afraid of.
Yeah.
Patches. That's a Todd thing. What's up with patches?
So last week, I think I mentioned that the Office Online Server patch, the January 2018 patch. There's a lot of numbers in that node. Got pulled, and it was a weird deal where the KB was still there. And it still had the download link, but then when you click the download link, you got a 404. So that told me that they got pulled. So I went and updated all my stuff at toddclint.com/SP2016 builds. And then I think you noticed here a couple days ago that it is back. It is a different number, a different KB number and all that. So I'm guessing they had something in there that they didn't like. So I have updated everything. So if you need that patch, you can grab it now. But that's, yeah. And it's funny that they didn't just wait a couple of days and put it in February.
I would like to point out that when you said it's back, instantly Gloria Gaynor popped in my head. I'm like, back from out. I started dancing. So once again, if you watched the show, you'd get to watch me dance, which is probably a negative. So maybe I shouldn't say that. Sorry.
You're not selling it
that
very
out.
well. Yeah. So yeah, if you've got that out there. Power Apps is the next thing. What have you been doing in Power Apps lately?
And if I mentioned before that I think 2018 is going to be the year of Power Apps, I love me some Power Apps.
I believe it has come up.
All right, well, that's good. So I spent way too long making 2 new videos, but now this is back to, I always tell people, you just got to talk to us, right? So somebody emailed me from my YouTube channel and said, hey, I'm trying to build a consent form and I'm stuck on this one part. And I'm like, I've never done that one part. Next thing you know, I spent the whole day building a consent form app and I got it working. And I found a bunch of weirdness with the pin input. The pin input does not work the way that you probably want it to, but it works. You just got to kind of work through the issues.
Yeah.
I got done with that, and I'm like, this is kind of cool, but not super sexy. So then I took that, and I was like, all right, well, now I want to gray out the consent button until you've signed the form, and I want to have a pop-up that says thanks for filling out my form. And I did. I spent almost all of last week making these 2 videos. But the good news is I teach a bunch of stuff about how to work with the pin input. I made a video around conditional formatting and pop-ups, and a lot of new Power Apps videos got made by this one guy's simple question of how do I make this one little line work? And, it triggered something. It was like I was one of those Manchurian candidates, right? My code word was said, I was triggered, and I just sat there and I wrote his whole solution for him.
Yep. And Shane showed it to me last week. There's some interesting stuff in there. And the thing is, neither Shane or I are developers in any sense of the word. And I think it speaks a lot about Power Apps that Shane, being the idiot that he is, can actually make useful things with it. I think that bodes well for the rest of us. And especially things like the pen input was interesting because Shane had in his head one way that should work in the background, and it didn't work anything like that in real life. And he was able to puzzle through that and still get the thing that he wanted without a lot of work. So I mean, it's an impressive platform. It is good for, yeah. I'm impressed with it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about it, right? They expose everything, right? Nothing's hidden under the covers. You don't have to write code to get to anything. So deconstructing how pin input worked, I just added a text field, to the screen that showed the different values, and they all update in real time. So then I started scribbling, and I could just see which ones were changing as I scribbled, and was able to kind of build a solution. Power Apps is really easy to deconstruct what's going on and figure out how to make your app do what you want to do. I can't say enough nice things.
Yeah. So you can go to Shane's YouTube channel and watch those videos. He is on YouTube at Shane Young Cloud.
Yes.
I just have it bookmarked. It's my homepage when I open up a browser, so I can't remember the URL anymore.
And there's that cute little tattoo on your butt of it, but that's neither here nor there.
I got a funny story. I'll go ahead and tell it. So I was at the gym yesterday, and
maybe you shouldn't.
No. And I was in the locker room at the gym, so it even sound. But no. So there was a kid there. He was probably in his 20s, and I noticed on his back he had a tattoo of a local business, which I thought was odd, and I'm not going to say what the business was but I mean it was odd. It was and I'm like, oh, maybe it's like a family-run business or something, and whatever. Still an odd choice for a tattoo, but whatever. I'm down with whatever. And then I heard him talking to somebody else in the locker room about how he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his career and trying to find jobs and all that. I'm like, so he's clearly not working in the family business. Man, did he lose a bet or something? It was very odd.
So you didn't ask him?
No.
What kind of reporting is this?
I'm not the kind of guy that talks to other guys in the locker room that I don't know.
About their tattoos.
About their tattoo. I was checking you. No, I'm not that guy. So I'm very particular about my tattoos. So if I have Shane's YouTube URL tattooed anywhere on my body, that it's a quality place to go.
So
the URL, not my body. Sorry.
So completely off topic, but you're a Modern Family watcher, right? Mm. So did you see the one where Cam and Jay play racquetball together and they're in the locker room and they both go to sit on the bench at the same time as they're changing and they're took us his touch?
I don't remember that scene.
Oh, yeah. So Jay freaks out, right? Because Cam's into weird stuff. And he's like, oh, we mean a moon landing. And it was this whole thing. And then later, the next time they play, someone else has a moon landing with Jay. And he thinks it's Cam. So he turned around and starts saying stuff. Oh, classic Modern Family.
Such a good show.
There you go. Drew knew.
Yep. Drew hit it. Thanks, Drew. Good to see you. So, all right, we need to wind this thing down. But let me say one more thing, though. In the chat room, a bunch of people have played with Power Apps and are having the same complaints that you have, and that is awesome that you guys are playing with it. So, because
they buy into it. 2018 is the year of Power Apps.
I thought it was going to be the year of the Linux desktop, but if it's the year of Power Apps, that's good.
All right, talk about something else we're supposed to.
So more things that are coming out. Let's jump. H is kind of in a weird spot. So let's do I.
Yeah.
More things that Microsoft has been coming out with. And this is another one of those where I'm not sure where we're at. I feel like we've talked about this like 6 times already. But with SharePoint Online, Office 365, the admin center is getting redone, and it's in some level. It's GA now or something. But this is that whole... You go to Office 365, you go to the admin center, you go to admin centers, you pick SharePoint, and it takes you to a new one. I'm glad that they're not letting those things keep stale. But I don't know that this one adds a lot, I guess.
Yeah, this one's a little boring, right? So, I think right now it's targeted release starts rolling out on 2/1, so tomorrow, or, 6 weeks ago if you're listening to the recorded version.
Exactly, yeah.
But yeah, so the dashboard is going to have usage data, relevant service messages, and service health. So it is not, like you said, it's not really exciting. I think what they're trying to do, though, is give themselves a new home base. Because today, when you go into the SharePoint Admin Center, you land on just the Manage Site Collection screen. So I think they're just trying to at least say, hey, you at least have a home page for the admin experience, and then you can drill into features. But there is not a lot of new functionality here.
No. But there again, iterative. It's a good thing. On the SharePoint side, another thing, and again, I have no idea where this is at in its real life cycle because I feel like we've talked about it a bunch of times. But the SharePoint migration tool and the SharePoint migration assessment tool both had releases sometime this month, or at least blog posts about releases, or Lord only knows. And so this is Microsoft's free tool that helps you migrate into Office 365. So it will let you migrate from SharePoint 2010 server, SharePoint 2013 server into Office 365, also file shares into Office 365, and I forget what the third source is, but so that is out there. Free tool. They've added a couple of cool things with the assessment tool. Now it does more identity checks. So it checks the permissions on the source, verifies that it can match that up in Azure AD, and tells you if it's a complete match, everything work, or mostly match, or have no idea who you're talking about unless you kind of line those things up. So good stuff there.
Yeah, I think good stuff there is the way to wrap a bow on that. I was excited to see it. I think SMAT, the assessment tool, is much more interesting and exciting than the migration tool because, we had PowerShell do the migration stuff, but the assessing your identities and things, that's new to us. So
yeah, and one of the things, Shane and I both do a lot of migrations for people and talks about migrations. And one of the things that we always tell people is you don't have to think about using one tool for your migration. You absolutely have buckets of things that you're going to migrate, and there might be a better tool for each bucket. So we're not suggesting that you soup to nuts migrate to Office 365 with the SharePoint migration tool. But what we are saying is you're figuring out your slices of things to migrate. There might be a super easy bit of content that you can just do this for free, zip it up there and be done with it, and just figure that into your toolbox of migration tools.
Yep.
So how could somebody keep up with all the things that Microsoft has done in the last month? Because there's just a lot. It's tough to keep your eyes on.
There is. Well, so, the good news is if you're a regular subscriber to the show, we do a fair job of keeping up with that.
Yeah.
But so then as part of that, because we were so good, we were sought out. And so now I don't know, whatever, Todd helped. So it's, he doesn't get any credit. He doesn't get any money
None
for
whatsoever.
it.
No money, no recognition, no gratitude.
But he definitely helped with it. But so we did an article on everything you need to know from Office 365 for January 2018. So it's kind of like, here's the highlights of the news posts you should go read, new functionality, that type of stuff. And then, little quips, if you will, kind of I try and put each one into perspective, why you should care or not care about this particular thing.
Yeah.
So there's one of those for everything you know for Office 365. And then at some point today at 8 a.m. in some time zone, they're going to release a SharePoint only version. So there'll be two different versions with completely different content, but just trying to make it a little easier for people who want to consume content, but don't want to consume all of it. And they need to know why this thing does or doesn't apply to them.
Yeah. And so that's at petri.com. The link will be in the show notes. For those of you that are listening on the audio one, you can always go to toddclint.com/podcast number. So it's toddclint.com/podcast 374 for all the notes. And we've got them in the Slack room right now. But petri.com, petri.com. You're probably already going there. Paul Throut writes a bunch of stuff there, Brad Sams. So go check Shane's article out. One thing that we ask, two things actually. Go out there and read it, give them the page views, but you can leave comments in there. And if you like the kind of stuff that Shane's writing, leave them a comment, let them know, because then that means they'll just come back to us and ask us for more stuff. And if you don't like the stuff that Shane writes, which is honestly a pretty reasonable reaction, lie and tell him anyway so that we can do more stuff for him.
There you go. Be like, I can definitely tell Todd helped with this one because it's about OneDrive, right? You know anything OneDrive is Todd related.
Yep. So the very last thing, speaking of all of this, Don Jones, who is probably, when it comes to PowerShell royalty, Jeff Snover, he's the king. There is none higher. But I would guess Don Jones could make a pretty good argument for being second in command for PowerShell royalty.
What does that make me?
I can't say this isn't the After Dark show. I can't use those words here. There's going to be children listening.
Pit of doom.
But Don Jones tweeted a thing where they're doing a PowerShell community contributors survey. And so they're giving you the option to shout out somebody who has helped you in your PowerShell journey. So blog posts, tweets, books, whatever. If somebody has been your PowerShell hero, give them a shout out. And the PowerShell team at Microsoft is going to, do something. I don't know what they're going to do. Shane and I are MVPs, and so we understand the power that kind of feedback gives. It helps us, do things like the podcast and encourage that kind of stuff. So if anybody has helped you with PowerShell at all, go fill out the survey. Again, it'll be in the show notes. But doesn't cost you anything, and give them a shout out. Let them know.
And you even do it anonymously, so my mom can just keep filling them out for me, just boom, 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 and no one will ever know.
My mom is doing it right now for me. So yeah, so good stuff. And you got to use PowerShell. You got to learn it. So give the PowerShell folks a shout out. Oh, so you want to hit L here quick?
Yeah. Well, so the last one here real quick, I just want to make sure I'm still truthful. Yeah. So Bitcoin, right? We talked about its climb up, and I kept laughing and mocking myself. Well, now it fell to under 10,000 for the day. So if you were going to buy, I think now is a buying chance if you are into the Bitcoins. There's other coins you might want to look at and consider, but it's one of those emotional attachments, right? $10,000 has no actual functional relevancy, but it's an emotional number for people. And the longer it stays under 9,000, it's probably bad. But as soon as it gets back over 10,000, it goes running up again. It's a complicated world.
Yeah. Yep. And Shane and I have dabbled with this a little bit. I will say, Shane finally broke me down. I invested in a little bit of Bitcoin, and my investment is down 9%, I think. No, 11% since I invested in it. So certainly I have many reasons over the years to hate Shane. Losing 11% of my investment is a big deal, a big part of that. But I think it's important to put it in perspective because that investment was $10 or $9.99. So now it's down to $8.80.
The good news is I lost that same with you. So I'm right there with you. We're suffering through this.
Yep. But that whole the cryptocurrency and the blockchain and all that, that's, as nerds, it's just something that we should know about. So it's fun.
Yeah, and that's what, as Todd and I know we weren't planning on talking about this for trying to wrap the show up, but for Todd and I both, we just kind of look at this almost as educational, right? We put some money in there. I've done some mining. We're just trying to understand how that system works because no matter what they say, I think at some point, somewhere along the way, this is going to survive. This is going to become a major player. And the sooner you understand it, the better chance you have of not getting eaten alive by it later.
Yep. And this just in, breaking news 12 seconds ago. PetriFeed on Twitter, @PetriFeed, tweeted everything you need to know about SharePoint January 20th. So this, you heard it here first. Shane's dumb article about SharePoint is up.
So, and it is also good to know, this one, Todd's down 11% overall. I think I'm up just shy, like 9.9%. So, yeah.
So enough about us. Let's talk about us. Shameless self-promotion. So we're both a couple. So tomorrow, actually, I don't have it in the notes, but tomorrow I'm going to the Omaha SharePoint user group or Office 365 user group, whatever. Driving over there, those guys are a couple hours away. Going to talk about SharePoint on-prem, SharePoint in the cloud, how to get it all, the synergy. So I'll be there tomorrow. If you're in the Omaha area, swing by. Then the next big thing we've got on our plates is the SharePoint conference in Vegas in May. It's a big deal. Big party, May 21st through May 23rd. You can go to sharepointna.com to sign up for it if you have not already. If you have not already, shame on you. But I know some folks that have been working through. I had somebody hit me up on Twitter last week and talk about that. They're just working through the process with their company and all that. And so they got signed up late, but there's still spots. So sign up for that. If you do sign up, if you do register, there are promo codes available to you with varying degrees of incentives. If you use the promo code Clint, you get 50% off. You get the
50%?
joy. Oh, sorry. Oh my God. I'll take that out in editing. $50. You get $50. And the joy of knowing that I also get $50. So, and a big hug. I can wear the vest if you'd like and give you a big hug. So join up for that.
If you use young, there will be no vest involved. So that's all.
You're not doing a good job of selling this. So Shane and I are doing a couple of sessions. I think there's still some jiggling around. I'm not sure what all sessions we're doing. And then we're doing an all-day camp on Thursday, an administration camp. So this is going to be on-prem administration, in the cloud administration, how they all mix together. Going to be a lot of things there.
Yeah. And we keep bringing this thing back up, but we just literally every week, Todd and I are getting these questions from people like, is this really a SharePoint conference? I mean, this is as close to the old school SharePoint conferences you're going to get. Microsoft is super duper duper involved. I think last I saw almost 100 program managers are going to be there from Microsoft. The keynote is Tepper. We know that he's going to announce something very big, SharePoint 2019.
It's May.
So, there'll be a lot of it really is a big deal. It's not just some rando, conference somebody made up in Vegas.
No, it's the real deal. I'm super excited to go there. Every time I'm gonna blog about it again today because I'm just excited about it. I don't blog as much as I used to, but it's a big deal. So do that and sign up for our thing. Also, not to be outdone, a few months later, we're going back to Boston. SP TechCon is in Boston, August 26th through the 29th. And not only can you sign up for SP TechCon at sptechcon.com, but SP TechCon, SharePoint conference is a SharePoint conference. It's the big deal. SP TechCon has a much different feel. It's a different type of conference. It's a more intimate kind of conference. And one of the things that they are doing this time is they're kind of doing an open call for speakers. And Shane and I are big proponents of whoever is listening to this or reading our blogs or whatever, getting out there and making a name for themselves if they want to. And this is a great way to do that. So there's a link. The URL is huge, but I'll have a link in the show notes where you can submit some stuff if you want to try to speak at SP TechCon. And I encourage everybody to do it. Something that somebody else doesn't know, you can contribute.
Yeah, you're going to come to the sweet speakers party with us, right? Watch Todd dance in his vest. Hopefully he's wearing a shirt under it, but no promises there. So
I got to be me. Yeah. So I think that is it. Do you have anything else?
No, I think we did a good job of getting to 45 minutes, which is probably too long, but no one gives us feedback, so we're just going to keep doing it until someone says this is bad.
As far as we know, they love it. So thanks, everybody. Again, we are in our final spot for now, Wednesday, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. You can join us on YouTube, subscribe to Todd Clinton Netcast on YouTube, and then follow us on Twitter. We tweet that stuff out.
Toodaloo.
Thanks, everybody. See you next week.